Thank you for downloading and tuning into this webinar program. This is not a live presentation. We have taped this because of audio difficulties that we had earlier this morning. Appreciate everyone's patience with that. This is a presentation on the United States Geological Survey's Field Audit and System Blank programs. These are programs that are operated by the USGS for the National Atmospheric Deposition Program, NTN and MDN networks. My name is Greg Weatherby. I'm with US Geological Survey. I'm in Denver, and a lot of you have received samples from us to process for your field audit and system blanks. We're going to get started with this brief slide presentation to answer some frequently asked questions, since most people have had some experience with this program. The first question that we get most often, may I process the field blank or system blank sample if I know that it didn't rain or snow during the sampling period, but the collector opened at least once during that time? And the answer is yes. So collector openings are acceptable so long as everything is running properly and you have had no precipitation in the previous week. What if dew or moisture condensing on the sensor caused the collector to open? The answer is no. Please don't process it. Fog caused the collector to open. Generally, no. Fog is not something we want to be measuring. There is an insect or there's plant material in the bucket, funnel, or bottle. Yes, you should process your sample. This is exactly the kind of contamination that we're trying to characterize with these samples. The collector lost power, did not operate for a portion of the sampling period. No, please don't process your sample if things were not operating correctly. The field audit or system blank sample has an expiration date from a previous year. No, if it's over a year old, you should probably dispose the sample and submit the accompanying postcard to us. The field audit or system blank sample bottle broke or leaked. No, please do not process your sample in that case. Now, with regard to number 8, there was one that we skipped over. If it's expired and you're still within the same calendar year, go ahead and run your sample. These samples really don't expire. They were deionized water for MDN samples, and we're not particularly concerned about the concentrations so much as the concentration difference. So you can process these samples if they're expired, but if they're over, if it's in the next calendar year, then go ahead and dispose of it. I pour the entire sample into the NTN bucket. What should I do? Dispose of the sample, submit the postcard to us, and tell us of the error that occurred. It's not a big deal. I pour the proper amount into the NTN bucket, but then discard the remaining portion. Again, you may as well dispose of that sample and submit the postcard, and again, note what happened. Or this is the worst thing that can happen. I accidentally pour the entire field audit or system blank sample into a valid NTN or MDN sample. What should I do? Dispose of the sample and make sure you contact everyone. You need to contact the NADP Cal, and you can contact me. Everyone should know if a real sample has been contaminated, basically, with a field audit or a system blank sample. Some common mistakes that we see are folks are sending in a dry sample envelope to the Cal, even though they've submitted a field audit sample. That's not necessary. The 2 bottles for the field audit sample and the accompanying FORFs are all that is needed for that week. Don't submit a separate FORF for a dry week. The other thing that commonly occurs is site operators will send in 1 bottle. There should be 2 bottles for each of these samples. The sample that rinsed the bucket or the sample train, and the portion of sample that remains in the original bottle that we shipped to you. We're going to come back to this a little bit later and discuss what we do with these data. So that will be at the end of the presentation. And right now, we're going to switch over to the video camera, and I'll show you a little bit about how to process these samples. So field audit samples, we'll look at NTN first. Field audit samples come in three sizes, small, medium, and large. We have a 2-liter, a 1-liter sample, and a 250 milliliter sample. And so you'll receive one of these sample bottles with your field audit kit. So if you suspect that you've had a dry week, you'll go to the field and just as normal, you'll download your rain gauge and you see 0 precipitation from your rain gauge. Open up your collector, look inside and see if look inside the bucket carefully without bending over the bucket and inspect the bucket to see if there's any leftover rinse water from the cal, or if there's any contamination, any debris, anything you might observe inside that bucket. Like I said, collector openings are acceptable. So if the collector open, you might have something in that bucket that would be good to observe and write down. So you'll switch out your bucket as normal, and since you're going to run your field audit sample, you want to put a lid on that bucket that you're going to bring back from the field, and put that in the plastic bag to protect it, and then bring that empty sealed bucket back to your facility. So you should have this coming back to your laboratory. And the way we want to process the field audit sample is first take the bucket out. You want to try to just grab the handle and nothing else. And again, this is done in your laboratory. Move some things out of the way. And you want to obtain an NADP sample bottle from your stock and fill out the bag as you normally would, so that you have your date and time off, and put your barcode label on that bag. So you'll want that from your stock. And you have your field audit sample. So open that up. Careful not to touch anything just yet. And then I'm going to disappear from you for a second. We'll get some plastic gloves. Got our lunch lady gloves here. So don your gloves. And just as if you were going to prepare a sample, a normal sample from the field, you want to grab the lid, being careful not to touch the inside of the lid or the inside of the bucket, and hold the lid toward you. And again, you don't want to breathe in the bucket or lean over the bucket. Place the lid inside up on the table, and then take your field audit sample, and you'll see that it has a red line marking the 25% full level on the sample bottle. You want to decant this volume down to the 25% line. So you're going to put 75% of the sample into your bucket. And if you're plus or minus a few mils, that's not a significant problem. So that's pretty close. Cap the bottle and put it back in its bag. And then carefully take your lid, being careful not to touch the inside, and seal the bucket again. And swirl the sample in the bucket to try to contact the bucket walls. Now you're going to let this sit for 24 hours minimum. So you're going to let the sample sit in the bucket overnight, come back the next day. And so now it's the next day, and we'll take our NADP sample bottle. New set of gloves, obviously. And what we want to do is decant our sample from our bucket into the bottle. So we'll undo the sample lid so that it's loose, but leave the cap on for a moment. Again, take the bucket lid just like we did last time, pull it toward us, set the lid on the side. Now take the cap off, inside up, and holding the bail of the bucket, just as you would for a normal sample, you want to pour the sample into the NTN sample bottle. Now remember, you're going to have some left in here if it's a 2-liter sample. You don't need to put all of the sample into the bottle. Now we have our sample contained in our NTN sample bottle. And this can go in your used supplies. So this goes into the bag as normal. So now we have the bucket sample, rinse the bucket, and a bottle sample. There's still 25% left in here. Included in your kit that we send to you, you have a cover letter that describes your expiration date and anything that might be a change to the program might be contained in the cover letter, so please read the cover letter. There are 2 sets of instruction sheets. We have some illustrated instructions and we also have some detailed instructions. And I'm going to take these gloves off in a minute. And then we have 2 FORFs, one filled out for the bucket portion and one filled out for the bottle portion. Look in section 10 of the form. You should have one for the bucket, one for the bottle. It's very important to keep these 2 straight. Then there are FedEx shipping instructions and a FedEx label so that you'll ship this sample at our cost. There's also a green postcard that's stamped postcard that's going to come back to me so that we can track the sample and be ready for the data when the data comes back from the Cal. So very briefly, what you want to do with your FORF when you're filling out your FORF is you'll fill it out for the bucket sample just as you would for a normal NADP sample. So starting with your site name and ID, you as the operator with your initials, the date on and date off, time on and time off, that correspond to the date off and time off in the field. And you also want to make sure that you have a matching barcode for both the bucket sample, the bottle sample, and also that barcode should be on your sample bottle bag. And there's also should be a barcode on your sample bottle. I have some barcodes here. We'll just do this just to be thorough. So make sure that everything has a matching barcode. Back to the FORF, for the bucket portion, you want to make sure that in section 4, everything is checked yes. For item number 3, the collector opened and closed at least once during the week. That could be yes or no. Let's see, for section 5, hopefully you'll be checking no for all those, but check those as appropriate if you found something in the bucket. And then for the precipitation amounts, everything should be circled, all the Z's should be circled, and you should have 0 for sample depth and also total rain gauge depth. And in section 8, you should have yes checked. Did you pour any sample into the bottle? And any observations in the remarks section, of course. Now for the bottle portion, you want to fill it out in an identical fashion, except you won't have any information in sections 6 through 9. So leave those sections blank. That's the only difference for the bottle sample. So what you'll do is you'll take these FORFs and both samples, put them in the same box that we ship to you, if they fit. If not, you can take a clean, new box from your stock and tape it to that box that we ship to you, so that you'll have two boxes taped together as one package. Make sure the FORFs go in here. So you're going to seal that up, and you're going to apply your FedEx shipping label, and then ship that to the Cal. The last thing that you need to do is fill out the postcard. Everything on here is self-explanatory, except the top part where you're supposed to check, was the bucket dry or was there rinse water that you observed in the bucket when you pulled it off the collector? If there's rinse water, please check the appropriate box. You're going to include the date and time off, and the date and time that you process the sample the next day. And then finally, there's a bucket on date and a bucket off date that are recorded on the card. Please send that in to us. Even if you don't participate in a way that processes the sample, if you've had no dry week during the year, please send in the postcard and just note on here that you had no dry week. Then I can at least count you as having participated. And thank you, Mark. I've just been corrected by Mark Rhodes, our quality assurance manager, who's too shy to be on camera, that we need to have matching barcode labels affixed to the bucket FORF and the bucket sample, and another pair for the bottle FORF and the bottle sample. So those barcodes should match between the FORF and the corresponding sample. Thank you, Mark. If it's a 6-day sample, since this is an interactive webinar, unfortunately, we're going to interject some questions. We've had a question just recently. I only had my bucket on for 6 days. Can I still run the sample? Yes, you can. What if you had an 8-day sample? That's acceptable as well. What about a 9-day sample? That's not acceptable for the field audit. You're only allowed 194 hours for the bucket to be on the collector. We want these to be valid samples. And so if it's beyond 194 hours, please do not process the field audit sample. That's not the case for the system blank, which is what we're going to talk about next. So we're going to reorient the camera now so that we can look at the MDN collector. And I'm hoping that Jason Karlstrom doesn't cringe when I mishandle this sample train. I'm going to try my best to properly handle the sample train, but since I don't normally do MDN sampling, this will be a challenge for me. So you've had a dry week. Again, come out to the site. You're going to download your rain gauge or take your Belfort chart off and assure yourself that there's been no precipitation in the previous week. And this time, instead of processing the sample back at the lab, you process this sample partially in the field. Because all the sample train is installed in the collector in the field. This is where you have to actually process the sample. So, to start off with, it's very important that we touch things with gloves that need to be touched with gloves and vice versa. So we're going to have to do the clean hands, dirty hands technique here in a way. So the first thing we'll do is open up the collector with no gloves on. And in this case, we're using the NCON collector. For an Aerochem collector, it's a little bit different procedure, but essentially same. So the next thing we want to do is prepare to process the sample. So let's just open, without touching the bottle, open the system blank sample bottle that you got. And by the way, these come in 2 different sizes. I'll just show you this one that's not in its bag. This is a 125 ml sample. This is a 500 ml sample. Again, you'll get one or the other, and we select them by random, or randomly, I should say. So we have our sample ready to go, and we have our gloves ready to go. And so now we need to open the collector. We'll make some rain here in the optical sensor of this dual chimney collector. No one's seen one of these before. This is a relatively newly approved collector in the network. So we open the lid and shut the collector off. And now we don our gloves. Now we're going to touch the sample. Remove the sample from the bag. And we want to stay facing into the wind if possible, as much as possible. And being arm's length from the collector, you want to pour 50%, and it's marked on the bottle, 50% of the system blank sample into the funnel, and being careful not to splash any sample around the top of the funnel, and also being careful not to overfill the funnel. Oop, a little too much. That's okay. As long as the HAL has 100 milliliters for both this sample and the sample collection bottle, we have enough sample to process for the program. So now what we want to do is close the collector to protect the sample. We're protecting it from anything falling into the funnel. And I should have said that when you process this sample, you want to hold this cap in your hand, pour the sample in, and then replace the cap. Don't set the cap down. Don't touch the inside of the cap. Don't touch the lid. Don't touch this to anything. And so now that we have it sealed again, we can put it back into its packaging. So you can put it back into the plastic bag that we shipped the sample in. So get some of the air out. And then this goes into the open slot inside your MDN cooler. So you'll have an open slot in the middle. Put your system blank sample in there. Okay, so now we just need, what if you spilled some of your system blank solution? The system blank solution are not hazardous, they're just deionized water. So if you ever have to dispose of them, if they ever leak, it's not something you need to get Neil Armstrong out in the suit to come and clean up. It's going to be, it's a non-toxic, non-hazardous sample. So now we just need to remove the sample bottle from the collector. And now that I've touched everything with these gloves, I don't want to be doing that with these gloves. And I'm going to open up the collector once again. So for this process, what we want to try to do is get our cap ready to go onto the bottle without touching the cap. And so if the cap is stored inside your collector, you want to try to get that. I should be wearing gloves to do this. See, Jason Carlstrom is going into the stratosphere right now, so I guess I'll put on some gloves. Well, I haven't touched the cap yet, so I haven't contaminated the sample. But this is the kind of thing that we're trying to evaluate with these samples. We're trying to look at how much contamination is in our samples from processing the sample, handling the sample, and also from naturally occurring debris and materials that can get into the sample. So handling it and potentially contaminating it by handling it is some of the things, that's one of the things that we want to try to do with these data. So I'm getting my cap ready. And I'm trying not to touch the cap. Or the inside of the bag. And I'll set the cap there momentarily. Again, I don't want to be touching the collector with a glove. So this is the tricky part. I'll open the collector, put on a glove, or open the collector, turn off the collector, put on a glove, and then change out the sample train. Change out the sample bottle, rather. So we're going to open the collector. We want to minimize the amount of exposure that this sample gets to the atmosphere. So the lid's cleared the collector. We can turn it off. Put on another glove. Okay, and now touching nothing else. Grabbing the sample train, and grabbing the outside of the sample train, grabbing outside the funnel rather. Take our cap, put the cap on the bottle, lower the sample train back in, and then this will go into our bag. Perhaps not the cleanest technique. I'm sure that MDN site operators who have experience with this will do this in a more elegant way than I've just demonstrated. So now we have our sample bottle that contains our sample collection bottle sample. I'll put that in the cooler. Close that, I guess. Okay, so now you would clean your lid seal and change out your sample train as you normally would. I'm not going to demonstrate that. Jason Carlstrom will be demonstrating that again on August 29th. So we're ready to take this back to the lab. That right here. So we're back at the lab, and we just need to fill out the paperwork, basically, for the system blank sample back at the lab. There's no processing that goes on at the lab. So what you'll need from us and what you'll have in your kit, again, a cover letter that describes your expiration date and any changes that may have occurred in the program. You'll have an instruction sheet. We're currently working on an illustrated instruction sheet. And 2 MOFs. Again, one is filled out for the system blank sample bottle that we ship to you, and the other one is for the sample collection bottle that we pulled out of the collector. So you have 2 bottles, 2 forms. And again, everything's fairly self-explanatory except on the sample collection bottle form, please check system blank in section 4. And also, you're going to circle the Z's for 0 precipitation and put zeros in for your precipitation depth. Overflow, no, your minimum and maximum temperature. And so that MOF is filled out. Again, any observations in section 10. The way that this one is different for the system blank sample bottle is you want to leave section 5 blank. Again, check system blank in section 4, but leave section 5 blank. 7, 8 are blank, and section 9 you can put in the temperatures once again. So then you have your paperwork done. That will go inside your cooler. And the last thing to do, again, postcards. Very important that we are expecting the data for this sample, and so it's nice for us to have this postcard. So please, even if you don't process the sample because you didn't have a dry week, please send in your postcard and tell us that you didn't have a dry week. Everything on this card is fairly self-explanatory. So now you know how to process both of these samples. And I'm going to take a question from Mark. No? Okay. So we're going to switch back to the PowerPoint presentation very briefly to show people what we do with some of these data. And just bear with us for a second. Doing the unedited version of this high-tech presentation that we have taped for your viewing pleasure. So I have a question from Mark, a simulated webinar question from Mark. Is the NTN sample hazardous? No. The NTN samples are either deionized water or they're a simulated precipitation sample. And they're non-toxic and non-hazardous. Thank you, Mark. So, picking up where we left off, what do we do with these data? Well, here's a plot of the contamination by analyte in NTN samples as described by the Field Audit program. And you can kind of see for each of those analytes how the contamination level has trended over the years. These are 3-year moving maximum contamination levels in NADP samples. And the red bar is just the most recent data for 2012. Actually, it'd be 2010 through 2012. And for the Mercury program, we can do something similar. Here are 3-year moving system blank data where we're looking at the maximum contamination levels and also the percentage of our data that are below the minimum reporting level. And you can kind of see that as the years have gone by, we started this project in 2004, and now in 2012 we've gone to 92% being above the MRL, down to about 15%. And so you can see a trend of more and more of these concentrations being above the MRL. But what does that mean in terms of the mercury mass that's contaminating our sample? Well, you can see in recent years, back to 2006, that it's been a fairly consistent mass of mercury contamination in MDN samples, about 0.3 nanograms total mercury mass in a MDN sample. And we have reports online on our website where we can go into a lot more detail. Another question, do we see differences in contamination between aerochem collectors and NCON collectors? Is a very good question. I don't have an answer for that. We need to do that analysis, and we're probably at the point now where we have enough NCONs out there in the network where we can do that kind of an analysis. As more NDN sites have joined the network, they're getting the newer collectors, and so we probably have enough data to be able to look at that now, and that's a very good question. So we have online training videos. This is what our video looks like for the field audit. And I will say that these videos were done several years ago. This is the Mercury video, the title page for the Mercury video. These are available on the NADP or the BQS website. So it's bqs.usgs.gov, and you can follow the links to drill down to system blank and then the system blank training video. I will say that these videos are a little out of date, but the concepts and the principles pretty much still apply, and I think that they're still very useful in training site operators. If you have any questions, you can call me. There's my contact information, and or you can call Roseanne Martin, who's a technician that works with me, and she can answer some of your questions too. We have our website, as I mentioned. You can look on there. Lastly, I want to thank Roseanne for helping with the props, Mark Rhodes and Brian Kirchner, who helped with the taping of this training. Jason Karlstrom was also helpful, and additional credits. So I just want to finally thank our catch efficiency technician, Phil DeBuckets, our optical sensor technician, Dewey C. Rain, our contamination technician is Harry Messenwater, our quality assurance assistant is Howie Doohan, and our Belfort chart reader is Violet Fingers, our meteorologist, Gail Forswinds, and a customer service rep is Ida No, and our SOP editor is Reed Pages, our accountant is Bill U. Later, and our webmaster is Dorothy.com. And thank you for your attention, and please do call us if you ever have any questions about processing your samples. Okay, we do have an operator online if you want to ask questions. So, thank you very much.